This is TriPoint Conversations, and I'm your host, Christina Lowe. Today I'm talking with Frank Mesa. Frank spent more than 30 years working his way from the front lines to the executive ranks of one of the busiest commuter railroads in North America, eventually serving as Chief Operations Training Officer, responsible for developing thousands of employees and leaders. But what interested me most about Frank wasn't his title. It was the belief that success, health, leadership, and personal growth all come down to one thing: the decisions we make every day. After transforming his own life, career, and health, Frank developed a framework he calls ERD: evolve, revolve, or devolve, and recently wrote a book about how that framework helped him turn challenges into opportunities for growth. Today, we're going to talk about discipline, sacrifice, leadership, and lessons from the amazing race and what it really takes to build a life you're proud of. Frank, welcome.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I want to get started talking about before the executive title. You spent over 3 decades in the railroad industry. Was that the plan from the beginning or something that you grew into?
Oh no, it's certainly something that I grew into. That was not. I remember, uh, when I was a kid, I would sing the song. I've been working on the railroad, and I never thought that actually that I would be an adult doing that. It just happened. I graduated from college. I was looking for work, and at the time, my girlfriend's mother worked at the railroad and said, "Hey, why don't you give this a shot?" And I went in at the entry level and learned a lot of lessons, worked my way up ultimately, like you said, to the executive level. But it's an industry that's not a joke. I knew people that died in the course of work, because it's a hazardous environment, and if it's not taken seriously, and if you don't follow the right protocols and follow the regulations, it becomes very dangerous very quickly, and you could lose your life.
And so, when you look back at your career, what were some of the defining decisions that changed your trajectory?
Well, for me, I believe that I just kind of always had this desire to do better and to evolve. So it was identified in me. Like I didn't even apply to become a manager. I started as a conductor, assistant conductor, then became a conductor, then I was a locomotive engineer. And these were very intensive, long programs of training and education. And I did very well in those courses, so much so that I helped a lot of other students along the way. And when one day I was operating the train, the gentleman who ran the training department at the time got up on the engine with me, and we had a nice conversation as we were riding up the Hudson line, up the Hudson River there. And um, the next morning, he called me and he said, "Hey, would you like to come work for me?" And I said, "Hey, Bill, yeah, sure." And then just kind of like that attitude that I always had of doing the best I could. My dad always said, even if you're a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you could possibly be. And so I always carried that with me. And I think that's what really always drove me to just achieve more and do more, and succeed.
So, do you think as you were building your career, you were building the framework of the ERD system that you later put into words, into a book?
Absolutely. I was giving it some thought, and I talk about this ERD um, method that I discovered. But I remember, my dad was a big influence in my life, and one of the things that my dad would say to me every single time I left his presence was, "Make me proud, son." He would say, "Make me proud." Now, understanding my dad's situation, he immigrated here from Cuba at 19 years old with nothing but the clothes on his back. He was escaping the communist regime, and he came here, and he went from a trajectory of going to become a professional like all the other men in his family. He was going to go to dental school and all this other stuff, to now he was here washing dishes and cleaning offices. So it's very humbling for him, but he always would instill in me, "Make me proud, make me proud." So even though I made mistakes and, I took risks and chances in my life, one thing that I always remembered, that was always on the top of my mind, was make my dad proud. So I was worked hard and made better decisions than the people around me, because I was always, doing that, trying to make
Mhm.
my dad proud.
And one of the things that stuck with me when we spoke earlier is you said people generally know what they should do. The problem is they don't always do it. So, why do you think that gap exists?
What I have found, and like you said, I was a chief operations training officer for MTA Metro-North Railroad, which is has about 7,000 employees. I had about 120 employees in my group, my department that was responsible for training, qualifying, and developing that workforce. And I saw a lot of people with similar knowledge sets have very different results and outcomes in their careers and so forth. And one of the things that I realized was that, outcomes become random when you don't have a system, right? So, our lives and our successes, just our lives in general, our failures tend to be a culmination or a cumulative effect of all the decisions we make.
Mhm.
And so people know what to do. But when it comes down to making those decisions, a lot of times those decisions are either made through emotion or through habit. So if you're making your decisions through emotion, you're not really filtering them properly. And generally, when you're making an emotional decision, it's generally not a good. And if you're making decisions through habit, unless you have really good habits, generally that doesn't work out well for you either.
Mhm.
So what I realized was because people didn't have a system, they can have the knowledge, they can have the skills, but without a system to make good decisions, they were making kind of chaotic decisions, which led to these random outcomes. Where I said, well, if you have the knowledge and skill, then you have a system through which to filter your impulses, your ideas, your emotions through to then make proper decisions around strategy and intelligence, then you can really achieve your goals. And that's what I found. I applied the ERD decision making framework to the goals that I have, and I've been able to achieve them quite well.
And so we also hear a lot about motivation today, but it doesn't seem that you put much value on motivation. Why is that?
Because motivation comes and goes. Discipline is hardwired. You say that you can replace uh, habits are hard to break, good ones
Mhm.
and bad ones. My goal in life is to replace the bad habits with the good ones as best as I can do. Have good habits and then apply this discipline. So again, the ERD framework comes into play here because if you have a goal or you have a something that you want to achieve, the only way of achieving that is by executing regularly, executing with precision and with regularity. And what happens is a lot of people, to execute regularly with discipline is going to be your choice to evolve. That's going to be your path to evolving. So if we talk about ERD, it means evolve. It stands for evolve, revolve, or devolve. So to evolve means that you're consistently going to execute on your plan, whether that plan is to lose weight, whether that plan is to develop yourself to develop your career, whether that plan is to have better relationships with colleagues, family, romantic, whatever. If you have a plan, your finances, if you have a plan, evolving is to continuously execute that plan through discipline. To revolve is to just kind of like, be stuck in a cycle where it's like, let's use health as an example. If you want to lose 10 pounds and you get on, you have a plan, it's written down, you've worked with a nutritionist, with a personal trainer, and they give you a great plan.
Mhm.
But it's your job every morning to wake up and execute that plan. If you don't do that with discipline regularly, you could be motivated and do it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the motivation wears off, and then you're back to your old habits. Now you're revolving, and you're on the wagon, you're off the wagon, you're on the wagon, you're
Mhm.
off the wagon. So it really is the commitment to making that decision regularly with discipline that's going to make the difference.
And then devolve. Um,
So devolve, that's basically going backwards. So evolve is, you're going to go forward, revolve, you're stuck, and
mhm.
devolve, you're going backwards. So, in extreme circumstances, people who devolve completely check out of reality, right? And so, what devolving looks like in extreme circumstances is people using controlled substances or alcohol or something like that, where they're completely checking out of life and um, and not doing well. So I'll give you an example of all three for myself.
Mhm.
So evolve. I made a personal audit of myself, and I said, okay, where am I evolving? Where am I revolving? Where am I devolving? So evolving my career. I was always doing very well in my career. I was, focused. I was getting promoted. I think at the end of the day, it was like all in total like 11 promotions to get to the executive level. um, Revolving, I was in relationships that looked exactly the same. So I was married and divorced 3 times, and it just kept going round and round and round in circle. And I said, why can't I break out of this cycle? It's just not a good cycle. And then I was devolving because all the stresses of life were driving me towards drinking for the most part. So I drank and ate a lot. So I was almost 100 pounds overweight. I was diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I had high cholesterol, and I was drinking almost, a bottle of bourbon every day coming home from work because that was the way I was dealing with stress. So that was a very destructive and devolving behavior that was showing up in my health. So devolve really means to check out. It really means to not take responsibility for yourself, for your plan, for your actions, and let it all just fall apart.
So then what habits did you put in place to focus on evolving each of those areas?
And it came down to this putting together a plan. So
Mhm.
I I committed to starting a morning routine, and that morning routine was to prepare myself, um, and made sure that I made myself the best version of myself before I introduced me to the world.
Mhm.
And so that way I already had the mindset and the disciplines done so that I felt confident and prepared to take on any challenges the day I had to face during that day. So it started with very, brief morning where I would, just kind of brief meditation, started reading some positive materials, and then it got to exercise and all of that, which now has expanded into a 4-hour routine, which I do every day. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I'm committed to and disciplined around getting up, whatever it is I have to do that day, 4 hours earlier to make sure that I get this routine in. And that has allowed me to evolve my health because at 55 years old, I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I mean, even when I was on the Amazing Race 25 years ago, running around the world, I was in good, visible shape. I mean, you would look at me and say, wow, this guy he's like in great shape. But I was, at the time, probably nobody knew, but I was smoking cigarettes. I was drinking, regularly. But now I'm in much better shape physically, emotionally, and mentally, which has helped me, just be the best version of myself. I have a lot of confidence. I have a lot of, swag, if you will, when I walk into a room because I'm in great shape. And then with relationships, I just realized that I needed to search what was it about me that what was I bringing to the table that was, getting me involved in those types of relationships. And when I took accountability for what I was doing and who I was, then I started to work on myself and work on those aspects of myself to break out of those patterns. So that's how I was able to evolve those areas.
Now, when you talk about getting up 3 to 4 hours early, that sounds like a big sacrifice. I guess, how did you go about doing that? And what would you say to help encourage others if they think that is just too hard to do?
I said to myself, when that alarm goes off, put your feet on the floor. It was that simple. And again,
Mhm.
that's why ERD to me is so magical, right? Because ERD is so simple. It's each decision. When we look at having to change something or trying to transform something, it becomes ominous. It's like, oh my God, like how am I going to lose all this weight? Or how am I going to improve my career? Or how am I going to improve my finances? Well, the way it happens is one small decision at a time.
Mhm.
And when I said to myself, when that alarm goes off, Frank, put your foot on the floor. Because once your foot goes on the floor, your entire biology changes because now you're up, like you're awake and you're not in a comfortable bed anymore. And now it's time to execute. And when I started to realize, okay, now it's time to execute, get up and do it. And I know it takes a lot of willpower, but that first decision starts to build momentum, right? So once you start building that momentum, and again, once it becomes a habit, habits are very hard to break,
Hmm.
good ones and bad ones, right? So once I created this habit, all I would say is if you have a plan, commit to evolving and execute on that plan. So if you're going to say, I'm going to get up an hour earlier and go for a walk, or I'm going to, start small, but start executing, start building momentum, build that discipline muscle. And once you have that discipline muscle, nice and toned, it's going to be very hard to get off.
And I guess whether it's mental health or physical health, there's a sacrifice either way. You're either going to sacrifice getting up early or you're going to sacrifice your mental and physical health if you don't get up early and do the things that you know you need to do.
Correct. And one of the things I say is that, a lot of people think, well, I'm not devolving, so
Mm.
life is okay. But that's generally not how it goes. The real trap is revolving. The real trap is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? Because they say that's madness. But, if you think of it, if you like to eat junk food, initially, it really doesn't matter. It's comforting. It feels good. It doesn't really show up. It's a habit that you've taken on, but ultimately you're going to get into a health crisis.
Mm.
So ultimately you will devolve if you stay in a revolve pattern of like eating badly, right? So it's not like you swallowed poison, right? Because that would be devolve immediately,
Mhm.
right? You swallowed poison. But if you revolve around bad habits and continue to exercise those bad habits, eventually you're going to hit a devolve spiral.
So, what habits, I guess, have made the biggest impact on your life?
Certainly physical exercise. I mean,
Mhm.
I think when it comes to confidence, when it comes to dealing with stress, when it comes to dealing with emotions, being able to work through your body, right? So one of the things is just being in control of your body, because anything that you cannot control, you're the slave of, right? It becomes your master. So one of the things that I started to do was fasting. I started to, I did a fast for like 7 days, and that was like a first for me. It was like, wow, I'm like not eating. I can't believe it. And
Yeah.
I 7 day fast. And then now I've incorporated like 40-hour fast. Like I'll do like, every other week I'll do like a 40-hour fast. And, the exercise. So when you gain mastery over your impulses, particularly physically, now you again gain momentum, you gain strength, you gain power and wisdom to apply to other areas in your life.
And so, are there things, though, that you can pinpoint that have caused you to revolve in your journey?
Oh, absolutely. So, I realized that certain emotional triggers made me have habitual behaviors, right? So, if I felt emotional pain or anguish for some reason, like if I felt hurt emotionally, that would drive me automatically to, go to the bar and have a few drinks.
Mm.
Um, and so I was revolving around that for years and years and years until I came to the, understanding that this was a habitual behavior. This was a habitual decision. I wasn't making this decision, logically or strategically. I was making this decision habitually because
Mhm.
I kind of, I grew up in Queens, New York. I grew up in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. There's a lot of, you know, uh, pathology in my community. There's a lot of drinking and drugs and things of that nature. And those are things that I just picked up from my environment. So that seemed very natural and very normal that that's what men do. You go to the bar, you drink, you kind of like, you blow off all your worries.
Mhm.
And I realized that I picked that up by habit. And that was a habit that I had that I didn't even identify uh, I was doing. It
Mhm.
was just something that I just did habitually. So once I realized and I put it through the ERD filter and I stopped, now every time I have an idea, an impulse, or an emotion, I stop and I say, okay, Frank, what would you normally do in this position? Oh, you'd act emotional. I'd act, habitually. Okay, let's pause that. Let's stop that. Let's think about what this decision is going to do. Is this next decision going to evolve me, revolve me, or devolve me? And then I say, no, I'm going to choose evolve. So then I stopped the alcohol was something that I I struggled with. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic. I'm not in like a 12-step program or anything like that, but it was something I struggled with for a very, very long time just because I wasn't aware of it. And then
Mhm.
when I was aware of it, I was like, oh, okay. And now, like I said, I'm at 55. So I see a lot of people that I came up with. Unfortunately, they're in really bad health conditions because of, abusing their bodies.
Mhm. And so you recently wrote the book about the ERD framework. What made you decide that that message needed to be shared with others?
I saw it make a profound difference in my life.
Mhm.
So I was really in a bad place. I was in a really bad place in terms of my relationships. I was in a bad place in terms of my health. And, my sister, a personal story, my sister died of a drug overdose with very young kids. And, I had to assist her raising her children. Um, Kind of family came together. But I saw a lot of people, my mother died of at a relatively young age from, bad health complications. My dad had some issues. And I was surrounded by a lot of people that just couldn't navigate through, life. The
Mhm.
life was coming at people very, very hard, and people weren't able to navigate through. And I started navigating it well. And I said, well, I have kind of this formula here that I want to share with the world because I know this is life changing because this is not academic. This is
Mhm.
not something I studied or went to a school for. This is something I lived. And this is something I live every day. And every day I'm getting better and stronger and smarter and just in ways that I wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago,
Mhm.
20 years ago, that I'd have this much mastery over my life. So then that drove me to write the book and to share this message with the world because if we don't have a system that gives us guidance, like a compass, a tool that tells you that's the direction you need to keep going in, you're kind of lost out here and you're meandering around, not realizing that you ultimately have the power to take control of your life in
Mhm.
every aspect of your life. And that's what the book is about.
When you talk about taking power over your life, did you feel like that came from within, or was there something else that you turned to for a power to help you get through that?
Well, it's a combination, right? It came from within in that I had the intention
Mhm.
to want to find a different path. And then the way life happens to work is that you have an intention and somehow the universe starts aligning things for you. And I stumbled upon Jim Rohn. Not sure if you're familiar with his work,
Yeah.
but he was a business philosopher. It's Rohn, Rohn, an amazing man. He had these incredible insights that he would share. And I read everything I could on him and his life and started taking some of his advice. And I call him my first mentor. I never met the man, but I really call him my first mentor. He passed away a few years ago, but he was Tony Robbins' first teacher, if you've heard of Tony Robbins.
Yes.
Uh, Jim Rohn really set me on this path of personal and professional development. So I know you could see here, there's like a ton of certificates and
Mhm.
degrees and things on the wall behind me here because I really committed to personal development.
Mhm.
And that commitment to personal development led me down so many different paths and got so much wisdom and insights that I developed my own system
Mhm.
that worked for me. Because you see, the thing is, we're all unique, right? We're all unique, and again, that's why ERD is it's very basic,
Mhm.
and all it's doing is telling you if you decide to evolve, you will find the way
Mhm.
because you will. If you choose to evolve, you will find the way. Somehow you will find the book, find the podcast, find the person, see the TV show, the movie, whatever it is that you need to get you to that next level. You will find it if you're committed to it.
Mhm.
And for me, choosing to evolve, learning that like my biology was very different from everyone else's, right? Like I had friends growing up, they could eat whatever they wanted to and they wouldn't gain a pound. Meanwhile, I ate, something and I'm just chubby and then I was getting fat. And I was like, why can I'm eating the exact same thing as this person next to me, but they are and looking good and I'm looking pretty much in bad shape.
Mhm.
So I realized that in that, I needed to continue my search and then say,
Mhm.
okay, what is it about my own personal biology that requires me to do differently in order to evolve my health? And then I found those things and I started to implement those things. So um, it's very baseline, it's very basic, but ERD, the commitment to evolving, is
Mhm.
going to get you your results ultimately. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight,
Yeah.
but it's going to happen eventually.
And you also mentioned casually that you were on The Amazing Race. So, how did that opportunity happen, and how would you say that that guided you in your career trajectory as well as in what you're doing today?
So yeah, that was an interesting experience, as you can imagine. It was the very first season of The Amazing Race, which was 25 years ago. It was when reality TV was really just, I think, like Survivor was like the first show, and then we came on a few months after that first Survivor season. So The Amazing Race came about just as a open cast call. So me and my partner, we went to an open cast call, and we got chosen to be, on this incredible journey, traveling around the world on this race for $1 million.
Mhm.
And it taught me how to behave under pressure, because I mean that's a ton of pressure. I mean, it wasn't just pressure for me, it was pressure for everyone, because no one knew where we were going. No one knew what was going on. I mean, we were in Africa, in Zambia, and we're sleeping in like huts at night. We could hear lions
Wow.
and wildlife like right by us. It's like, are they going to attack us? Like, I don't think anybody really knew. We were running towards Victoria Falls, and we almost all ran over the falls, because there's no like railing or so. It was an insane adventure
Mhm.
with great lessons around dealing with pressure, around self reflection, because there's nothing like thinking you're a certain way than seeing yourself on national television and being like, wow, I didn't know that that's how I could be.
Mhm.
So I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about humility, right? So, um, you know, that experience was weird because you're an ordinary person. Then you get, thrust into the spotlight. All of a sudden, I'm in Hollywood.
Mhm.
I'm at award shows, and I'm being, chauffeured around in limousines, and I mean, you name it. It's kind of like this insane, like, Cinderella story experience, and then boom, you're right back to work.
Mhm.
It's like there's like no decompression zone. It's not like, it's like okay, like now I have to deal with some depression because life was so good on the other side. It's like
Yeah.
not quite an experience, and now I'm back to work, and now I have to figure out, how I'm going to process all of this and get back to the grind. And that was challenging as well. And that, again, that's where a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, a lot of that kind of thing came in to try to numb that pain, which was not the best thing to do, but
Mhm.
it's certainly part of my story.
And are there any misconceptions about the show or being on the show?
Well, again, because we were the first season, that there was like a lot of things that I think the production staff was shocked. Like the production staff was so shocked that we were moving so fast. So
Mm.
like, I'll give you an example. Like we were in India. We were supposed to be in India like a few hours. I think we ended up in India like 4 days because they needed to prepare the forward location. And we were just moving so fast. At one point, I was on a plane with the executive producer, and he's like, "How are you on this plane?" And I'm like, "Because I looked it up and I found it." And he's like, "I never thought you would be here." And I'm like, "Yeah." And we had this great conversation flying from Bologna, Italy to, I think it was New Delhi,
Mhm.
India. And it was like this great conversation. But again, I think they were shocked at,
Mhm.
how quickly everybody was moving and doing the things. I want to remind you, this was before 9/11. So we were running through airports, through security, under velvet ropes and all that stuff. And it was mayhem. But
Mhm.
that has changed, I'm sure. But I don't know exactly what they go through now. But I will say that kudos to that production team and that network. I mean, it's been 25 years. They've had I mean, they're coming up on like 50 seasons or something like that. It's just insane the amount of work that they continuously do to keep it interesting, to keep people engaged.
Yeah. And are there any lessons from either teamwork or you talked about pressure that you did carry with you outside of the season?
Well, I'll share something with you that I realized later on in life. So it wasn't until just a few years ago when I discovered ERD and I started to identify my relationship dynamics. I realized, and I said to you before, I had to realize and understand what I was bringing to the table to have these relationship dynamics.
Mhm.
And I realized I had a very codependent type of personality. And a codependent personality type attracts a different type of, an opposite type of person, which a lot of times gets caught up in like narcissistic dynamics.
Mhm.
And I was caught up in a lot of that throughout my life. And so it was something that I learned about myself, being able to look back, because a lot of people don't get a chance to do that, right? Like things aren't recorded in your life.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I could look back and say, wow, okay, like I see where I was behaving this way and how I was, you know, baited into reactive abuse, or how I was baited into gaslighting and things of that nature. So it was really a great tool for me to use later on in life so that I
Yep.
could reflect on myself and improve my personality so that I wouldn't continuously have these dynamics in my life. So
Mhm.
that was the biggest gift I would say that the Amazing Race gave me, was my ability to go back and reflect and see who I was then,
Mhm.
and now I can compare that to who I am now, and it's completely different people.
Yeah. And so as you think about where you are today, what is one thing that you are still trying to improve?
So, that's a great question. Thank you, Christina. As I said before, I worked for 30 years for one of the largest and busiest commuter railroads in North America. I retired as the Chief Operations Training Officer last year, September 2025. And pretty much immediately thereafter, I started my own consulting firm called Mesa Solutions, Inc. And so now I released the book, and I'm looking to assist others, individuals and organizations, to find out where they're growing, where they're stuck, where they're going backward, where they're evolving, revolving, and devolving, and help them to pivot and to evolve in those areas that they feel are important in their lives. So I am now, on an entrepreneurial path where I'm looking to improve that aspect of my life,
Mhm.
to become, what I did in my career was impressive. I was an
Yeah.
executive. I won awards nationally, internationally for incorporating, technology into training on the railroad, for virtual reality, augmented reality, digital testing, things of that nature. A lot of innovation, so I'm very happy and comfortable what I did there with developing that workforce and putting in all those years and all that effort and all that value. And now I want to take that and take it to the next level. I want to really take this worldwide. I really want to give people, a tool
Mhm.
that's going to let them live their lives to the utmost and to run their organizations optimally. So that's really the next level that I'm looking to evolve in.
Because it does seem like the ERD framework is, we'll call simple, but most things that are simple are hard to implement. To get healthy, it's simple. Just eat healthy and exercise. If, you're looking at making improvements in your life, it's simple. Just look at where you want to evolve. But I'm sure coaching and reading a book and getting that internalized really will help people make that step into truly evolving instead of just the revolving door.
Yeah, it's simple. It's not easy. I like to say it's
Yeah.
simple, but it's and that's where my consulting comes in and my coaching. It's like I can help you see those blind spots and get you clear on those areas that you're revolving or devolving,
Mhm.
and that you're looking to evolve, and help guide you to get there.
Yeah.
And again, it's simple, but it requires commitment to uh, choose not to sit on the couch and eat a pint of ice cream
Hmm.
and instead, eat a handful of pistachios or something, right? It's a big
Yeah.
difference. But it's something that can be done.
Hmm.
I've done it, and I'm the proof that it can be done.
Yeah. And so, one final question: what advice would you give yourself earlier in your career as you were starting out?
So I would say, um, make better decisions and do not allow your emotions to get the best of you,
Hmm.
right? Because a lot of people believe, and I did, I believed that my success was proof positive that I was always doing the right thing.
Hmm.
uh, I didn't realize that my success was also giving me blind spots because I didn't realize where I was falling short or where I could improve
Hmm.
in different areas because I had this amazing track record. Oh, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm doing this and I'm winning awards and I got promoted and I can't do anything wrong. I got the Midas touch. But I realized that created a lot of real blind spots for me. And then I was protecting my ego with my emotions, and that was a recipe for disaster, which thankfully I learned lessons from it, and I
Hmm.
and I was able to pivot and evolve that part of myself. But certainly letting my ego get the best of me, I now say, uh, your ego is not your amigo.
Yeah.
So, I let my ego get the best of me, but I was able to rein that in and really make better decisions, not ego driven decisions.
Yeah. And so, if someone's trying to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Yes, they can go to my website. It's Mesa Solutions Inc.com. So it's MESA Solutions Inc.com. That's the best way to find me. You have my email address on there, my phone number's on there, and you can contact me.
Okay. And we'll also include those in the episode notes. Frank, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christina. I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for having me on again. This is, you're doing some great stuff here.
Thanks for listening to TriPoint Conversations. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend or someone who's navigating their own next chapter. And if you know a story that deserves to be heard, or maybe that story is yours, head to tripointstrategicgroup.com and send me a note. I can't wait to keep this journey going with you and introduce you to more incredible people who are shaping their communities one story at a time.